you're really trying to develop your own leadership and scale, you need to be in a situation where you're not micromanaging. You are setting the objective, the desired outcome, but then you're giving your team space to do that.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Camden and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And, I thought I was going to have some big problems Saturday night and then with the snow. But fortunately, Mother Nature took care of those problems for me, and I didn't have to do anything. That's the best kind of snow to have this time of year. And I'm going to guess, Camden and Tucson, you didn't have that problem this weekend, any snow?
No, but it was beautiful because when y'all get snow, we get a little rain, we get a little wind. We were in the 70s all weekend, nice and beautiful out here, so I can't complain.
Yeah,
that's that beautiful thing in Colorado, though. You get the sun, you get the 300 days of sunshine, melts that snow next day. Ooh, that's nice. You get best of both worlds.
That's a secret. Shh, don't let anybody know that. And speaking of sunny weather, coming to us from sunny California, our good friend Bryce Henson. Bryce, man, I'm guessing. You were in Salt Lake over the weekend. Did you get any of that snow that we had here?
We didn't. It was a little cooler. We could see the snow from the mountain peaks, but then making it back to Southern California yesterday was nice and warm, more of my temperature. So
you were like, get me on that plane quick, weren't you?
That's it.
Awesome, man. Bryce, something I'm really curious about because I love this idea is your legacy tribe. And I'd love to dive into that and have you share with us, well, you're a successful businessman. You've got some great gyms going, and we'll get into that and what started that. But what at this point in life, what was the driver that got you to kick that project off?
Well, twofold. I think first and foremost is I love your messaging around the podcast, having a leadership focus. Leadership, everything rises on leadership. That's so important. And if you want to be able to build an incredible organization, you need to be able to lead yourself first and foremost before you can lead your family and before you can lead your organization. So I've really taken a liking to building teams, connecting with people, leading people. And as I mentioned before you can lead an organization, before you can lead your family, you need to lead yourself. And that was the creation of Legacy Tribe. My business partner, Bedros Keuilian, who's the founder of Fit Body Bootcamp, which I'm the CEO of, and our other dear friend, Jason Redman, who is a retired U.S. Navy SEAL, spent over 20 years in the service, Purple Heart recipient. What we realized is there's a void of leadership. There's a void of personal discipline. In fact, 80% of our population here in the States is either statistically obese or overweight. And gentlemen, what that tells you and tells us is there's a need for self-discipline, better leadership among ourselves. So that was really the spirit of launching the coaching group, which then it allows us to recruit men and women who want to be better leaders, who want to be, more successful physically, from a emotional perspective, from a professional perspective, from a personal perspective, to guide them and on a weekly coaching call to be able to pour into them their body, mind, and soul, and really get them to a better point where they can be leaders of themselves. And that's really the essence of the Legacy Tribe.
Where did your kind of personal connection to that legacy and to, because I see the vision of the need for leaders, recognizing that, but why did you go do that? Why did you feel the need to go, make that impact?
Yeah, well, I just think that, again, going back to the story is if not who, then if I ask myself a question, I actually take back. If not who, then if not me, then who? And if not now, then when, is really what I was trying to articulate there. And having that kind of mindset is like, now is the time. And as you articulated, the essence, the naming convention, Legacy Tribe, is just that, to lead a legacy, because that's what life is all about. We got one shot at this globe. It's about the relationship you make, the impact that you have, and the legacy that you can pass on to your loved ones, to your family, to the people in your organization. So getting our people in that coaching program around the mindset of what can you do today for yourself to build a better version of you, so you can support the people that you serve. So when you look back at your career in the next 10, 15, 20 years, you can look back and say, yes, I fulfilled myself. Yes, I provided, a good living for my family. But more than that, I provided something that will impact future generations. And that's really the essence of the tribe.
No, that's great. So as you build that, what have you learned? Because I think that's still fairly new in your repertoire, right? That's my fancy word for the day. Tick that box.
$5 word. There you go.
There you go. But what have you learned in shifting the focus into that sort of mindset?
I believe what I've learned is people are hungry. And to your point, we're shooting this podcast in, Q2 of 2024. We launched the tribe in Q3 of 2023. So we're coming up about, we've had 6 months solid traction within the group. We have hundreds of members. What I've learned is people are hungry, even though there's a deficit of leadership. People are hungry to learn, to grow, to be connected. What I've also learned, and we know this to be true, human beings are tribal in nature. So being able to, seek in with other like-minded individuals, build community, build relationships is really, really valuable for the mind, body, and soul. And, we all need coaching. And I think, having other people, along the journey with you has been really impactful. The feedback has been really strong. So those are a few things that I've learned out of the gate. And I'm very, very excited for that. When we were excited to launch the program, we were confident that there was going to be a need. We didn't really fully understand the pent-up need, the pent-up demand, and the amount of energy that has really gone into the program.
So there's the big need. You already had some success entrepreneurially under your belt, and then going into that, so everything went perfectly smoothly, right? Of course not. I think we as entrepreneurs like to think that it's like, you have to fail 10 times to get one thing right. We forget that after that, to get the next thing right, you have to fail 10 more times, that kind of thing. Could you talk a little bit about some of the failures or things you didn't see coming in this first 6 months?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, it never goes to plan, perfectly to plan. Now, the good news is my business partners and we have, I guess, combined 50 years of business experience, running coaching programs. So this particular launch went exponentially smoother than many of our earlier business endeavors, which is the value of getting reps and sets and battle scars in business. So in the grand scheme of things, I actually can't say that we had a major issue in terms of launching the program. It was well thought out. It was well put together. We had the vision of launching the tribe at my business partner, who is the founder. Jason and I are co-founders of Legacy Tribe, but his event is called Bedros Keuilian Live, or BK Live. So we launched in September with a captive audience of nearly 500 people in attendance. We started putting the concept of the coaching group together about 6 months before. So really, we've been planning and executing this for a solid 12 months. So planning, preparation. I mean, I've heard this from a leadership framework many years ago, which I've really latched onto. The separation is the preparation. So, we did a great job of laying down the framework. So when we launched the program at a live captive audience in September, we had 300 enrollments, from that weekend, which was huge. So that kicked us off in really strong fashion. We also had a lot of recorded content from a library. So when our Legacy Tribe members, got in the group, they already had a lot of information to digest, and we already had the coaching cadence planned out. So we have a weekly coaching call on Wednesdays. Bedros takes the first call of the month. I take the second call of the month. Redman takes the third call of the month, and we have a guest coaching call. So we laid out that traction, which has really been, very strong. So those are all the good news. Cam, going back to your question, what we've seen, probably the biggest bottleneck or challenge is, now that we have 6 months of traction in the group, we have hundreds of members, we open up the Legacy Tribe once a quarter. So we do it 4 times a year. And we just opened up our third time where we brought new people in. And the biggest bottleneck that we're currently working through is, how can we take the current tribe members who've been in the program for a solid 6 months, and how can we integrate the new ones so the new ones feel supported, but they also don't feel overwhelmed? Because some of the feedback that we received from this new batch of tribe members who just opened up in April of this year is, when they entered the group, there was so much foundation, there was so much teaching, they actually felt behind, they felt overwhelmed. So right now, just giving you some insight, that's the bottleneck that we're trying to work through, so that when we onboard new members, they have a step-ladder approach to digest the information, not feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's such a key element, and I love that you identified that, because Yeah, that's the last thing you want is bring in new folks and them feel like, oh, well, this is too much. And look how advanced they are, because there's so much value in integrating, the people that have been in with it for 6 months with somebody that's just starting. But those newbies can come in and go, oh man, I'll never, I can't do all that. Yeah, that's really. Have you gotten? Yeah, I can see you've. I've hit a nerve on that, so I'll shut up and let you add to it.
Yeah, sorry, it's just an interesting problem to solve, because you think when we're putting together this, the coaching program with all the videos, the content, the coursework, we're just stacking so much value. Clearly, there's a ton of value. It was unbelievable. It was a really interesting, kind of feedback to get, to think that actually there's almost too much value. In order to really make this digestible, we need to take a step back and create more of an onboarding structure. So, interesting lesson from an entrepreneurial perspective. Even though we're doing all the right things, you got to listen, you got to lean into the feedback, and then that way you continue to course correct, which is probably a very good entrepreneurial takeaway.
Oh yeah, it is. It reminds me of the old sales lesson of selling features versus value, right? And this is also, I think, a great way to segue into the fit it says it on the wall behind you, but I still can't get it out my mouth. The Fit Body Boot Camp.
There you go.
Breathe, Otis. All right, breathe. And how you make that adjustment, because I mean, what do most gyms do, right? They like, we got this really cool bench press, and we got a sauna, and we got this. I'm just going to throw us back to that part where you learned that lesson in running and setting up these successful gyms, so that you weren't selling features. Walk us through that.
Yeah, I love that lesson. And for those of you new to the show and just following Otis and Cam, a great lesson in terms of salesmanship. You never want to sell features. You always want to sell the benefits or the value that the persons get behind the features. And as an example, in the gym business, as gym owners, speaking for myself, I was so fired up in 2012 to launch my first facility and got the bells and the whistles and the TRX and all the equipment. At the end of the day, friends, my clients don't care about any of the equipment, any of the bells and whistles. What they care about is one thing. Is the program and the coaching we deliver them going to get them fitness and fat loss results? Are they going to lose weight? Are they going to get in their skinny jeans? That's the problem we're trying to solve for them. They could care less about all the features and the equipments and the shiny obstacles. So I think that's a really good lesson to start. Now, to answer your question, it was kind of taking a step back, and I think there's a great lesson around pivoting and adjusting, because our brand started in 2008, 2009, fresh off the Great Recession. This is over 15 years ago. And my business partner, Bedros, he founded the franchise. And at the time, this is before the Great Recession, he was executing one-on-one personal training at gyms. And that worked really well until 2008, the real estate crisis happened, and people who had enough money to afford one-on-one personal training, unfortunately, they didn't. So in order to maintain and keep the value of the coaching value, the results, what he did is he transformed the model from one-on-one to more of a group setting. So that way he could train more people, leverage his time, but also reduce the amount of price point for the client, which is a huge value to them. It's more affordable, but also it creates community, and it creates, a coaching, and gets them a great result. So he transitioned the model from that pivot that had to happen in 2008 to an outside model. So he started running boot camps or group training. And he did that for about a couple years until the model actually started to gain traction. And some of his other friends in the industry reached out. It's like, hey, Bedros, how have you transitioned your model? He's like, well, hey, Great Recession, people don't have money for one-on-one training. We pivoted to group training. We're doing parks. Well, that works in Southern California, but we just talked about, you in Colorado and Michigan, where I'm from, we have these things called weather and elements and rain and snow and all that. So the next pivot that Bedros did at this period of time was like, all right, well, there's cheerleading studios who have availability in the morning, because typically in cheerleading studios, they only use the facilities after school. So what if we sublease, because the model of, running boot camps or group training in parks is working, but we need to put it in a model where it's indoors, so it's outside the element. So cheerleading studios was the next pivot. So we pivoted that model from 2010 to 2012. And what we recommend our licensee program at the time, our licensee partners, to go ahead and sublease different spaces at cheerleading studios. You can't do any evening sessions, but you can do morning sessions, and that way they're taken away outside the elements inside. So that was the third pivot, and the fourth pivot happened in 2012 when our brand was really starting to grow. Other people wanted to come on board from a licensee program, and Bedros had the vision. He's like, you know what? We're doing well. We're subleasing spaces, but there's still a pent-up demand for people that want to train in the afternoons. What if we can make an adjustment and actually have brick and mortar facilities, so that way we can lease our own locations, we can fully build them out and take that group training model that we pivoted to years before, but now have the opportunity to train in the afternoons and in the mornings. And that was really the birth and the creation of Fit Body Bootcamp. So to put a bow on all this, about vision, about entrepreneurship, is about having a vision, about executing your vision, putting out your vision in the marketplace, doing more of what works, and then listening to feedback for what doesn't work and making adjustments. And that's really the name of the game of business and entrepreneurship. So that's the big lesson in terms of what I would see of the last decade of being in this business.
I'm really curious, talking about that decade, and to be honest, I was already thinking this with Legacy Tribe, talking about that first, 500 people that you talked with, got to 300 that weekend, and then as it kept going, is that you're not going to necessarily get the same types of people. We talked a little bit in our pre-show call about, a little bit more your personality, your philosophy with some things, how you attract people that are like that. Well, also, I think in the fitness industry specifically, it's like, are you always going to get those people? You're always going to get the other types of folks that just want the quick fix. They want the magic pill. They want these kind of things. And so there's a really interesting, you talk about the community of being able to develop that community, because you're not always going to get the same folks coming in. How do you work to kind of get those people aligned that might not, somebody coming in wanting the magic pill solution, and you have to completely flip that over and get them integrated into your community? How do you get that to work in a way that doesn't break that up?
Ooh, love that. I mean, that's $1 million question for sure. And the coaching business, what I've learned specifically in fitness and personal growth, is you need to sell them what they want and then give them what they need. So there's an element of being able to provide the vision of what that client wants. However, in the fitness space, does a client want to work out, 4 or 5 times a week? Do they want to track their meals? No, but you need to get them in the door. You need to show them the results, and then you can provide them the coaching and, taking a step ladder approach of what they need to do in order to hit those results. So I think that's really an important, aspect to be able to drive interest, but also to be able to support the deliverables on that, so your client can get the best results. So I want to start there. But the second aspect actually has to go more of the marketing message, which is really important. So and I'll go back to Fit Body Bootcamp specifically, since Otis, you asked me about that particular program. It's a group training program. So our dream client, our dream avatar, we call Mrs. Jones. She's in her 40s. She has a couple kids. She's 40, 50 pounds overweight. She doesn't love working out. She's not trying to shave off a second to make the NFL Combine. She's not a high performance athlete. In fact, it's the opposite. She hasn't worked out probably since high school or ever. She doesn't like working out, but she knows that she needs to lose weight, feel better, move her body, eat better, so she can show up to be the better version of herself for her family, for her kids, because typically she takes the back seat. So having a very clear understanding of who our avatar is, who our dream client is, so important, because Cam, to your point, then we can create a marketing message that really attracts Mrs. Jones and meets her where she's at. Because otherwise, certainly we can train all types of people, and we do, but if we're sending a marketing message to Olympic weightlifters or to yogis or to, all the different types of fitness, there's going to be a disconnect when that person actually arrives to our studio. So going back to put a bow on it, 2 things. Number 1, you need to be able to sell the dream result, but also give your client what they want, but also give them what they need when to deliver that. But then more importantly, to make sure there's a proper expectation, you need to understand your program, what it can deliver, and make sure your marketing message really does a good job of tracking that avatar. That will have an exponentially a better time for you to deliver the results for your client and make sure their expectation is on par.
This is a good time, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about in the avatar, because about 50% of business owners, founders understand that, and the other 50% think they got to serve everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is also a good transition to your coaching programs and how you're with your franchisees. Is that what y'all call them? Do you call them franchisees?
I call them. That's one terminology in the franchising industry. I just call them franchise partners. It really simulates more of a partnership.
Yeah, I like that term better, anyways. And how you help your franchise partners discover what their avatar is. Also, what do you say to the person that's like, "What? Yeah, but I could take this whole neighborhood. I don't care whether they're 12 or 72, and we could serve them all. Everybody needs to work out." How do you solve that for them?
Oh, Otis, you've been in the business game a few times with that question, because that's just human nature. And to your point, if you try to be all things to all people, you are nothing to no one. That's really what it comes down to. That'll create massive market confusion. Eventually, you'll be frustrated. And many times, for example, franchise partners back in the day, before we had a really built-in system, before we had better operations and better, compliance measures, we would be able to provide some flexibility for franchise partners who want to train kids like 12 to 15, et cetera. Well, training a kid 12 to 15, it's a great thing to do. Like, our children need fitness as well. In fact, 20% of our child population these days is obese, overweight, which goes to show that they're learning bad, health and nutrition examples from their parents. But that all aside, training a 12 to 15-year-old is a very different experience than training a client in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. So typically what happens is, if you try to expand your program, then you're going to miss the deliverable. You're not going to really give the client, the 12, 13, 14-year-old, the attention, the result, the support they need. They're going to get frustrated. And then ultimately, because your focus is shifting on the 12, 13, 14, trying to figure that program out, your eyes off the prize on delivering your core competency to your dream client, they're going to get frustrated. Then ultimately, you're going to get frustrated because you have many different types of customers who want and have a need that you can help, but because you have split focus, they're frustrated, you're frustrated. So that is a recipe for disaster, my friends. So the solution behind that is get really good at knowing who you are, what you can deliver, and who you can deliver to. Get super good at that. For us at Fit Body Bootcamp, we want to be the best fitness and specifically the fat loss program. Not for everyone, not for Olympic bodybuilders, not for children, not for people who want to shave off a second on their 40 to make the NFL Combine. That's not who we are. We are for Mr. and Mrs. Jones, everyday working people that don't love fitness, but they know they need fitness, and we can deliver them a great fitness and fat loss results with 30-minute sessions. That's our secret sauce. So the solution behind that is get very clear, just as we did. And the good news is once you get very clear, once you deliver that, and then if you have future ambitions to add a different program or a different business, you certainly can do that, but don't do that before your core competency is solved first.
Yeah, I love that. It's you can go down those different paths later on, but it's like you build up this one and then you can step into that next one, just like we talked about earlier, going to those other business ventures. I'd be really curious because this is one of those things that I think a lot of people deal with as their business grows, and I think what you're doing with Fit Body Bootcamp is a very specific example of it, because you're talking about like the coaching aspects. And the franchise partners out there and developing, and you want to give them some freedom to be themselves and to put their stamp on it, those kind of things. At the same time, you're trying to control that outcome. You want to make sure people are actually losing that weight. You want to make sure they're in the right market. All those kind of things there. Could you talk a little bit from a leadership perspective of how you kind of handle that? Like, you're giving them the to-dos, you're giving them the path forward and all that, still giving them the freedom to put their own print on the things, but then also you have to control that outcome. You have to make sure that outcome's still there.
Yeah, totally. So I think that's really the biggest challenge for any franchisor is to be able to create the systems, the structure that the entire system can execute against, but still be able to provide that autonomy. And I would even say in a service-based franchise system like a Fit Body Bootcamp or many other service-based franchise systems, it's even harder than a product-based franchise system like a McDonald's or Subway, which is very productized. I would say what's really worked out well for us is we teach the systems, the business structure, and give them all the tools and assets in our system called the Fit Body Way to be able to provide the structure and support so that our franchise partner and their coaches can deliver the core outcome, which is really what our brand promise is. So that's really important for us. But then what we do is we teach how to create culture, because ultimately culture creates in the thoughts, the ideas, and the actions of every individual owner. And granted, we want a culture of enthusiasm, of positivity, etc. But every franchise partner has the opportunity and ability to put their own spin on the culture, the environment of the location. So we teach products and or processes and business systems, and we provide them as a tool and deliverable for our franchise partners. We don't teach the culture. We teach them how to build culture so they can put their own personality, their enthusiasm. And that's how we're able to, within a brand consistency, have a really strong brand that delivers the client, the dream result for our clients, but also to be able to provide that autonomy, that flexibility, and that personality for each of the franchise partner, which is really, really important when you lead specific to human nature.
And with this brings to mind a lot of similarities with my coaching with the Engage Foundation, talking about making sure everyone's engaged at all levels. Somebody who's never seen rugby before, making sure they're having fun and not just being completely overwhelmed. Somebody who's been with me for 8 years, making sure they're having fun and not feeling it's too easy, all those kind of things. And then I have the same kind of thing with the coaches, where it's like we're growing, so I have the different coaches out there. And I want to give them the freedom to operate, but it's like, where do you draw those lines? It's a really interesting thing. I know for me inside of rugby, it's things like, there's tactics, there's ways of talking about things that are, like let the coaches run with that kind of stuff. But it's like, hey, you better teach them how to pass the ball like this. And that's it. And it's like, you kind of find those different lines there. Could you talk about maybe an example of having to reposition one of those lines? Like something that you set and you're like, hey, this is kind of the rule. And then you saw people running with it. You're like, all right, I need to add a couple more rules here or something.
Well, I'll give you an example of how that really works well. What I would say in leadership, I'm definitely not a micromanager. And I think if you're really trying to develop your own leadership and scale, you need to be in a situation where you're not micromanaging. You are setting the objective, the desired outcome, but then you're giving your team space to do that. And I think that's a really strong leadership, philosophy that's worked really well. As an example, we just got back last month and we executed one of our big 2 in-person team trainings for our business coaches called the Fit Body Elite Trainings. We had 150 people. We went out to the Midwest. It was all of our coaches. And when I was training my team or setting the foundation for the team, this is what I showed. I gave them the desired outcome. This is what we want to do. We want to have a 2-day training event. The whole goal is to bring 150 coaches together, pour into them the energy, the process, the systems of Fit Body. And I want them to leave a fire-breathing dragon. I want them to leave a better quality fitness coach. Now, that said, these are the parameters. Okay, this is the desired outcome. But in terms of how you teach that, the role plays you do, all this, that, and the other, that's up for you. And I'm talking to my brother, who's my executive director of coaching and profitability, who executes the event. So he had the desired outcome, the infrastructure of what I wanted to accomplish, and he had full autonomy to figure out what works best with him. Now, to answer your question, going back to the very beginning, Cam, he's a highly trained assassin. I've been working with him for over 10 years in this business, so he doesn't need micromanagement. That's a very different type of instruction I would give compared to a new teammate coming through. So when I told you I don't micromanage, I lead by providing the desired outcome. When a new person's coming on board, I micromanage, and I tell them for the next 90 to 180 days, I'm going to micromanage you. I'm going to give you the exact details what I want. And then once you execute those and you build more trust, then I'm going to give you a little bit more leash. And then when you do the same thing, then I'm going to give you a little bit more leash. So I think, it's always better if you can proactively set the expectation at the very front end. That way you don't have to go back in and then, have to make adjustments from a micromanagement perspective. So that's the philosophy that I ultimately lead. The other example that I'll showcase more in the sales framework. So one of the things that we do for Fit Body Bootcamp is we teach our franchise partners, when you bring in a trial, how to give them an experience, how to sit them down for a strategy session, and then how to give them value and also sign them up for a membership. So a strategy session is a value add, a value-based consultation, a sales consultation. But no one likes to be sold, but people like to be poured into. So in that particular framework, we give them the 3 structures or the 3 parts of that particular strategy session. One of the things, though, is it's up to them to be able to provide some stories in terms of either their own personal fitness story or a client story. So we don't give them the exact story. We say, this is the framework that you have to execute, but put your own personal touch in. Maybe you tell your story, tell your wife's story, or tell one of your client's story. So that's another example of leading with that desired outcome, but giving, and really in your words, Cam, giving them the strategy, but providing them the autonomy to execute the tactics that it's going to be best serve them and the client.
I want to jump into something I've always found interesting. I kind of scratch my head on it. It's the franchise owner, in your case, what y'all are calling franchise partner, versus the startup. I'm going to make a widget and I'm going to build my business around this widget, and I find this really interesting because I'm the startup. With a couple businesses, and then I'll point to Miss Suzanne downstairs. Miss Suzanne is the franchise owner, and it's interesting when you step out into business world how different organizations, to include chambers, at least the chambers I've been around, treat those two organizations very differently. I'd love your perspective on that, and if you've gotten that same sort of feeling of you're a franchise, so you don't count in this category.
Forgive me, I didn't follow the full question.
Yeah, it was kind of confusing. So what I've seen and heard in my my business journey is almost instead of treating a franchise owner and a business startup as entrepreneurs, they treat them differently. It's really an interesting thing. And I don't think you see that until you own a franchise, until you're involved in a franchise industry, no matter what it is. And I'd love your perspective on that. If you've seen that same sort of thing and what you've done to overcome it.
Yeah, well, I think that this actually speaks to the essence and the nature of the franchising business and the different relationships that a franchise partner is to compare to the organization. I say this from my own experience because in 2012, when I joined the brand, for the first 6 years, I joined as a franchise partner. So I say I was in the franchise partner side, I was in the fitness side of the brand. However, in 2018, when Bedros, my business partner, founder of FitBody, reached out to me to be his vice president, then eventually the CEO, then I transitioned away from the fitness franchise partner side of the brand into the franchisor side of the brand. And really what I say is I jumped into the franchising industry. And the franchising industry is an absolute beast. It has very good qualities and characteristics. You're able to scale, you're able to grow, massive impact and really massive revenues, and very lucrative at that. On the flip side, it is very complex. There's a lot of moving parts. You actually are serving two different industries. In our case, we're serving the franchising industry, but also on the other side, the product and service that we sell is the fitness industry. So all this to say, Otis, what I've learned is that our franchise partners, we have two types of relationships with them as a franchisor. Number one, look at the balloons and confetti, all that.
Balloons.
The two types of relationships that we have, number one, they are a business partner. So we need to be able to treat them as a business partner with proper competency, give them the vision, just like you would be able to treat any business partner that you own a business with. That's one aspect of the relationship. The other aspect of the relationship, they are a client of FitBody Bootcamp. They're a client of our franchise brand. And the reason that is if you look at the money flows from them to us. So anytime someone pays you certain deliverable, then you have a duty, obligation, responsibility to provide that deliverable in return. So it's a very interesting relationship because, to your point, Otis, we have two types of relationship with the franchise partner. So depending on, I guess, the individual circumstance, they have to be treated a little bit differently depending on the situation. What this means is from the client perspective, we need to service them. We need to make sure that our communication is super clean. We need to make sure our deliverables on point and anything they need for us within our level of expectation and communication can be delivered on. All right. So that's the franchisor as a franchise partner, as a client of the franchisor. On the other side of the coin, they are a business partner, meaning if they start putting different paint and different, sales structure, and they start going off brand from a compliance perspective, that doesn't work from the business partner perspective because, hey, we are business partners. We agreed on this design. We agreed on this outcome. We agreed on this branding. You now need to be compliant to make sure that, you're in proper standing. So to that point, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. Do we have it all figured out? No. But what I've learned is in human nature, if you lead, if you pour into people, if you set proper expectations and you provide, love and support, typically being a people business more than anything, it's worked out well for us. And that's probably been a huge reason for our exponential growth of the last decade.
Do you, either from your own perspective or from franchise partners you've worked with, do you think there is a legitimate difference in the type of person? And what I mean is like that kind of your question of like, is the franchisee an entrepreneur, is the startup an entrepreneur? And it's like, are they there? There is a difference there, I would guess. I think there's a little bit of a difference in personality. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, good question. And that gives me the opportunity to really dive deep. I actually think when I take a step back, about 10 to 20% of our franchise partners are true entrepreneurs. And what I mean by that is they have the mindset, they see a model that works, and what they want to do is they want to latch onto that model that they're in their mind, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. They have something that works, and then they want to scale it. So a lot of the franchise partners that we see that I would classify the type of franchise partner that's a true bred entrepreneur are about 10 to 20%. And they typically want to scale, not just to one location, not just to two location, to handfuls of locations. So I would say that's more of the entrepreneur mindset. And there's no right or wrong, but that's just is. But Cam, to go back to the other point, about 70 to 80%, maybe even 90%, of our franchise partners come in, I would not call them true bred entrepreneurs. I would call them high performing operators, where they want to own a job. They want to own the system, the business. They don't want to scale. They don't want to have business systems that really create an entrepreneur environment, but they want to own a specific piece of the pie, and they want to operate and have the autonomy of that piece of the pie. So that mindset is definitely very different than a purebred entrepreneur. So to your point, even in our system, while our relationship with our franchise partners are twofold, one is a client, one is a franchise partners, to dive that, even pull down the onion or dive down that path even further. What I'm trying to articulate here is within our franchise partners, there's the two types of mindsets. There's the entrepreneur mindset, and then there's the mindset that's a high performer that wants to own a job in a system. And it's interesting, working with those two types of mindsets, it's interesting. It takes a little bit of time to learn how to communicate, connect, and serve them as well.
Do you think, and just for anybody listening who might be playing around with business model, looking at franchising, those kind of things, or maybe taking their business and looking at the franchise route as a path to growth, do you think there, not a right answer, one size fits all, but do you think there's a connection there between the type of business, like for instance with Fit Body Bootcamp, that specific type of business, that specific franchise? Do you want the high performing operator, or do you want the entrepreneur? Like if you could pick, 100%, not the 10 and 20, like 100% entrepreneur, do you want that, or do you think that might be detrimental in another way to the business? What are your thoughts there?
Interesting. I would say specifically for the product that we serve, and if I was overseeing a Subway or McDonald's, then I would probably say that I would pick the entrepreneur, because that model from a product perspective, most people aren't passionate about Big Macs. They're not passionate about footlong sandwiches. What they see is a business model that serves a need. So having an entrepreneurial mindset that wants to scale, I would say if I was in the CEO seat of one of those organizations, that's what I would probably want to attack and gravitate to more. Specifically in fitness is a very personal, it's a very relationship-driven business. It's a very vulnerable business. People, when they come, they're broken, they're beaten. They've, tried fitness many times over. They're in a really bad place. It's not that they want to lose 80 pounds or 100 pounds, lose 80 pounds or 100 pounds. Yes, they want to do that so they can unlock more confidence, more self-esteem. So because of that, there's a different level of touch and experience and relationship with fitness. So Cam, to answer your question, because I'm the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, which Fit Body Bootcamp is an international fitness brand, which is a very relationship-driven brand. It's very vulnerable, very passionate-based driven brand. For our brand, I like high performers, not necessarily entrepreneur mindsets, but that can be the king or queen of their city, that love fitness, that don't necessarily want to scale to a handful of locations. They can if they want, but they want to breathe the culture, the life, and really make that location super successful, because that's really what a fitness brand and a fitness operator needs. So because of that, that's the fitness type of operator that we try to attract.
You remind me, one of my give backs to my veteran tribe is I coach guys that are getting out of the service. And as I've been doing this now 5-6 years, I've really discovered, partially because of owning a franchise and knowing who I am as a veteran and watching these other veterans, of how interesting it is and how good of a fit it is for veterans to buy a franchise and be that, because in the military, that's the role. I think you hit the nail on the head. High performer. You're showing up into a job that's already there 90% of the time, and your job is to make it better and then hand it off to the next guy. Have you seen that experience? I know Jason, as a partner, I don't know if he's said anything or recognized that or brought that out in y'all's discussions.
I mean, people from the military, by the way, so much love and respect for your service to our country. I have so much respect and appreciation for that. So I want to start there. The second thing that I want to touch on, specifically for our business model, again, going back to the fitness space and then high performers, military people do really well on average. Sometimes the bottleneck is making sure that they can work with people and they realize they're not training people in an actual boot camp. They're training real life people. That would be the one caveat that I like to kind of bring out. But aside from that, because the system is set, because the mission is there, because the passion of fitness, which typically many people in the military have, it's a really, really good fit for our organization, because military, they can come in, they have the passion, they have the SOPs, they have the mission, and they just freaking execute. So with our particular model, military people work really well, to answer your question, Otis.
That's cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and grab it, Camden, because it's off subject. It's actually going back to something that you brought up earlier, and I'd love to hear your thought process that you went through from being VP of Business Development to CEO. That's an interesting transition. I'd love for you to share some of those lessons, if you would.
Ooh, I think the biggest lesson is just the weight of the different level of responsibility. So, certainly a vice president of business development had a lot of responsibility at the time. However, it's a different level of responsibility when you step into the CEO, the chief executive officer of the role, because at the end of the day, you're the number one, which means there's no pointing fingers. If this isn't working, that's not working. You need to take the mirror right in front of you and look at the mirror and say, okay, that's not working because of me. And certainly I would like to think I attacked business even when I was the vice president, even when I was a franchise partner in that route. And that's what led me to, receiving that bigger opportunity. However, there is something material different about being a second in command or third command of the company, being the first in the command of the company. So, having a big back and big shoulders and having a full understanding and going in that you are going to have to take full responsibility for the organization, I think is mission critical. Having strong emotional intelligence is probably the biggest thing that I've had to continue to develop, because there's a fire on the home front. If I take a step back, you look at, military generals, people, leaders of different, countries. The Roman Empire always had some sort of fight on the fringe, some sort of border, being attacked. That's just the name of the game. So as a leader, as the chief executive officer, moving away from the VP role, you have to have an understanding that you are responsible for everything. You have to take complete ownership of the entire operation. And you also have to realize that there's always going to be a fire. There's always going to be something in the business that you need to be able to improve. And you need to understand that from an emotional intelligence perspective, you need to be able to develop yourself an emotional perspective, even more so than other aspects. So that's probably one of the biggest learning lessons, Otis, and the biggest journey that I've been on, transitioning from that VP role into the CEO role.
Talking about that responsibility and that weight, and that you said in the intro every episode, we talk about solving big problems, and Bryce, I think there's a really interesting, or I think your industry and your business is a very interesting case study for something else that I think we can see in a lot of the world, which is we look at a lot of these really big problems, and one of the reasons that we don't take action on these big problems is because we make them so big in our head. What we like to refer to on the show is we make it a big bad guy. It's when you make it the isms and all those different things. It's it's my life's not bad. It's capitalism. It's this. It's you throw it out there and it becomes this big thing, and then I no longer have to address it because it's no longer me. You talked about that, from the fitness perspective of like taking that personal ownership. But there's so many, to me, big bad guys that people are so easy to blame inside of the fitness industry. I can imagine. It's not. I'm not overweight. The food industry is poisoning me. I'm not overweight. I'm this sugar, and I got addicted because I was a kid and they advertised to me. And it's like you can point to all of these kind of things and take it off of yourself. What I'm getting to when I mean it's a case study for other lessons is how do you help to get rid of that big bad guy and bring it back to personal responsibility? Because the personal responsibility in any of those examples I just kind of tiptoed around is where you move forward. It all comes back to the person, but you have to get them to think that way. What are your thoughts there?
Love that. We are kindred spirits. And, two things can be true. All the things in my industry about the health, about sugar and about the food industry, those are all true. But at the end of the day, you can't point the fingers because if it has to be, it's up to me. It's the mentality that you need to be able to take as a leader, as an entrepreneur. So interestingly enough, both the franchise partner perspective, but also our client perspective. This is why mindset coaching is a lot of what we do. We lead with mindset coaching, even before fitness coaching, even before business coaching. I have a mindset article every single week that goes out to both our franchise partners and our franchise clients to basically work between the 6 inches in between their ears, because that's so important. And that dictates everything. That dictates ownership, that dictates accountability. Because otherwise, you're right. If you're going to pass the blame, while there's probably plenty of blame being passed around, by passing the blame, you're not taking ownership, you're not taking responsibility, and you're not taking accountability for the results that you need to achieve in your life. So that's the message I certainly relate to, and that's the reason that mindset coaching is so important, and that's what we lead on all aspects of the organization to really better our people.
Oh, that's a great point, and that responsibility and self-ownership is so important. And my self-ownership on what I learned today, the more I think about this, the more I just snicker at it. It's the too much value, because everybody talks about stacking value. There's a sweet spot for every business of where that is. You can still have all that other value back here around the corner that you can bring in when it's time. But man, if you're sitting there, whether it's a sales call or an onboarding, and you start going bang, bang, and you get this, and you get this, and you get this, I think you lose that person, because you've just hit them with so much information that they forget, well, why was I here? I thought I just wanted to come work out. I thought I just wanted to help my business grow. And you're giving me all this other stuff.
We call about this, Otis, we call this a step ladder approach. Mm-hmm. It's really important to be able to provide a step ladder for your client. To your point, as business owners and entrepreneurs, we want to continue to stack the value, which is important. You have to have deliverables in your organization, but you need to be able to present it in a way that's easily digestible for your client. Otherwise, analysis paralysis comes up. And what's the famous adage? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And the reason that is because when you're up against eating an elephant that seems so massive, seem overwhelming, and people can actually just shut down. But if you are able to provide them a step-ladder approach on how to bite-size be able to break this up, that's where the success happens.
Love it. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, kind of in the same vein, actually, but it's, selling what they want and then giving what they need. I think that's just such a great lesson. I think we've talked about it with Tribe of Purpose before, those kind of things where it's, people, sometimes you talk about the things they need, it almost becomes too scary for them. And then, whether it's too valuable or jumping into that fear is too much for them, they don't want to go that route. You give them the easy thing, you give them the thing that they want, and then it's like, okay, hey, the medicine's in there. The medicine's in there with the sugar type of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, a spoonful of sugar. There you go. Bryce, we were just calling sugar bad a second ago. Wait a second.
I know. Sorry. We're mixing too many metaphors.
Hey, Bryce, man, what'd you learn?
I learned just in my reconnection with both of you, there are good people in the world that are hungry, that are passionate, that are on the mission of self-responsibility, self-accountability. I'm walking away with so much from this conversation. That's probably front of mind. So I really appreciate you both. This has been an awesome chat.
Awesome, man. Hey, Bryce, how do folks find you, learn more about Fit Body Camp, see if there's one in their neighborhood, hopefully?
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much for the opportunity. 2 ways you can find us. Our website is probably best, fitbodybootcamp.com. That's fitbodybootcamp.com. And then would love to continue to add value to you and all your listeners. You can find me personally at all the social media handles, whether YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, at Real Bryce Henson, not to be confused with fake Bryce Henson. So that's where you can find me.
When I hear that, I just thank Mom and Dad for naming me Otis, because I don't have to worry about whether it's the real one or the fake one. Bryce, man, it has been great having you here today. We really appreciate your time.
Likewise, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. A special thanks to our guest, Bryce Henson. Bryce Henson for joining us today. Good thing it's the outro, not the intro. That would have been bad. Remember, you can watch films of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see you all next time.